I'm Torrey Rick. I'm a curator of North American Archaeology in the Department of Anthropology. And per Kay's request, I dated myself. So you can see I joined the museum back in 2008. Now, it's become increasingly clear that we live in the Anthropocene, a geological time period that's characterized by human domination of Earth's ecosystems. Now, as we grapple with the rapid and dramatic changes that are facing our planet's biodiversity, archaeology, paleontology, and other historical sciences have emerged as important disciplines that can help us use the past as a tool to better understand present-day patterns and ultimately to try to help predict future change. Now, my research draws on zooarchaeology, which is the analysis of animal remains from archaeological sites. So it uses zooarchaeology to help us understand past environments or to reconstruct past ecosystems and ultimately the role of people in shaping the structure and function of those ecosystems. More recently, what we've been doing is trying to use these zooarchaeological data to help us better inform contemporary environmental management. You can see this picture that I've showed you here is one of our study sites where we do a lot of field work. This is on Santa Cruz Island, which is part of California's Channel Islands. And I do a lot of work with shell middens. This is a picture of one of those. Shell middens are basically big refuse piles of all the trash that people left behind, much more environmentally friendly trash than we produce today. Because I work in coastal and island areas, you can see it's dominated by shellfish and fish and marine mammal remains and birds, all of the things that people were eating and then bringing back to their site. And these things ultimately become archives or records of what people were eating, and then from that we can extrapolate to what environmental conditions were like. This is a look at another one of those shell middens. This particular one is from the Chesapeake, where we've also been working. Here there's much less taxonomic richness. This midden is really dominated by oysters, although there are a few other shellfish species, and then pottery and stone tools that help implicate people as the agent of accumulation. I have kind of one just simple goal for the 6 minutes today, and that's to try to demonstrate the utility of archaeology and interdisciplinary research for helping us understand the past, present, and hopefully the future of ecosystems and biodiversity. And I want to just draw on two very brief examples. The first one is some research we've been doing on California Island or Channel Island foxes. This is a collaborative project between the Natural History Museum and the National Zoological Park. And then the second project is some work we've been doing on Chesapeake oyster middens, and then specifically a little side project we did looking at the composition of plant communities on archaeological shell middens versus nearby sites that are not shell middens. All right, so island foxes. This is some research we've been doing for about 10 years or so now, trying to understand this cute little endemic and how it ended up getting out to the Channel Islands in the first place. Island foxes are an endangered species. They're a diminutive relative of the gray fox that's found throughout western North America. They're found on 6 of the 8 Channel Islands, and they're an apex predator. They're about the size of a house cat, and since you now know they're an apex predator, you can understand that there's not a lot of mammalian species out there, particularly any large carnivores. There's been a debate for quite a while as to whether or not they naturally rafted out there prior to human arrival, and humans arrived, we know now, about 13,000 years ago, or if they were brought out by humans, a gray fox that brought out, subsequently evolved, maybe through some human influence, into the island fox that's there today. We've been doing a pretty comprehensive program involving radiocarbon dating, morphological studies of both archaeological, subfossil, and then modern specimens. And then most recently, we've been doing work using genetic analysis of both modern specimens from the islands and then also ancient specimens. And this genetic research forms the basis of Courtney Hoffman, PhD student's research at the University of Maryland, pictured here, and then also our collaboration with Jesus Maldonado there, and they're sampling foxicles or frozen foxes at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. We raised the idea back in 2008 in quaternary research that people might have brought foxes out by reviewing the archaeological and fossil data for foxes. And one of the interesting things is they've had a very close relationship with Native Americans throughout their occupation. There are formal fox burials, pet cemeteries in a sense, with foxes and dogs. People revered them. They're often buried in kind of high status areas. And we ultimately found that all of the foxes that we know of from both the archaeological and fossil context post-date human arrival by about 6,000 years. There are none that are older than about 7,100 BP. That only got us so far. You know, did foxes then raft out during the human era? What was the ultimate role in people in determining this? So lately we've been doing high throughput sequencing, analyzing whole mitochondrial genomes from modern foxes. This is something I don't expect you to get in the brief time period, but if you look at the top, there you can see a divergence of island foxes from mainland gray foxes happened sometime between about 9,200 and 7,100 years ago, so well within that human era. This has kind of led us on to speculate more about the role people might have had in moving foxes in between islands, and what Courtney and our other collaborators are doing now is starting to put ancient genetic data into this mix. Very quickly, in 1 minute, plant communities on Chesapeake shell middens, what we've done is a paired study there using collaboration with John Parker and Susan Cook-Patton, two plant ecologists there, looking at the composition of plants on middens versus those in adjacent sites off. This is Dan Weller, a fantastic intern who's now a grad student at Cornell University, taking samples to analyze soils, and then also looking at plant materials. There, one of the things we found in our analysis of soil chemistry, not too surprising, but soil nutrients on middens are much higher than those off middens. And so obviously 45 times higher calcium, not too surprising given all the shell, but much higher nitrogen and other plant nutrients, very different from areas just a couple meters away. And so we looked at how this might correlate with plant diversity, and one of the things we found is there's 24% greater biodiversity on middens, and this includes a higher number of natives, and then 22 taxa that we found only on middens. So this is a very interesting pattern. What we're trying to do now is expand that out and look at how this might play out in other areas of North America and indeed around the world. And so I want to conclude with just a quote I've shown before in talks. I apologize if you've seen this, but it's something that I think is very basic but very important, and that's that archaeology and other historical sciences can really challenge us to think about what's natural. Where do we fit into the natural world, and how do we shape the world that's around us? And specifically, the legacies of past land use, the things that people did in the past, follow us up to today. And ultimately, it's understanding those patterns that I think can lead us to a better understanding of where we're headed in the future. Thank you. All right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, are we arguing that people might have brought foxes out to the Channel Islands? And the answer is yes. We're very carefully suggesting it. We can say with pretty good certainty that people were moving foxes prehistorically between the Channel Islands. We can't say with 100% certainty that people brought the original population out. We don't have the smoking gun quite yet, but it's looking more and more like that way, and we're hoping with our new ancient DNA data that it'll help us tease that apart a little more.